coming and sitting at the feet of elders. It's my pleasure to talk about a program which we called Nyungar Know-How. Many years ago I worked over at Murdoch University. I started off there as a student and ended up with a job looking after students. And then after a while, the director came to realise that I could teach Nyungar language, and he asked me to write up a course to teach Nyungar language. And I said to him, well, look, I'm not a university graduate. I said, but let me go for a walk in the bush. When I come back, I'll have my answer. And over at Murdoch University, where the Kulbari Aboriginal Centre is, there was a little footpath that one of my brothers, Lenny Collard, used to walk up every day. But one day he was bragging to me about how he used to walk up there for the past 10 years. So I decided to walk down that little footpath and go and seek the answer for my director. As I walked down that path, I stopped and I thought, what's this? That's a piece of stick from a fence post. Because my father used to do fencing up in the Brookton area. And I thought that it was a piece of fencing post, but it wasn't. After picking up the stick, I realised that I had picked up and found a very special smoking stick. When I turned it over, I realised that this was a traditional smoking stick that was made by the Nyungar people. When I rang my father up and asked him about it, he said, I'll come over and have a look at it tomorrow. So he came over to Kulbari Centre where I worked, and he had a look at it, and he said, you have found a very traditional smoking stick, which is over 200 years old. He said, and it was made in order to smoke the stinging bees out of the trees. The stinging bees came on the boats. Previous to that, Nyungar people used to be able to go to the trees and collect their honey and eat it while still standing there. They couldn't do that anymore. So I took it home and smoothed it down, and then I put some red and yellow ochre over it. And that stick has been the basis of my journey back into my culture. When I went back up to speak with the director at the time, Wayne Webster, and I showed him the stick and I said, I've got my answer. Yes, I will teach Nyungar language. So for the first year, I only taught the language to Aboriginal people. Then the students over there started asking why couldn't they learn this course, do this course. So the introduction to Nyungar language and culture went from being only a course being offered to the Kulbari students to a course that was offered to all students across Murdoch University. The first time a university ever taught a language across Australia. One part of that course still runs today, and it was a course that Leonard and I got together and set up to be offered across the world. I have been offered quite a bit of money for this by my brother Neville. I said, but when I die, I'll leave it for you in my will. So that was a journey that drew me out to look at what other things can we do as part of our traditional culture and language. Then I received a phone call from my brother Neville. He said, we've been asked to do a presentation, run a workshop up at Herdsman Lake. And I said, okay, what are they wanting? Well, I want to learn about Nyungar culture, right? I said, are you going to write it up? No, it's your job. So I had to write up a course, and it was called Introduction to Nyungar Know-How. Because I said to Roger Harris at the time, I said, you can't teach Nyungar traditions without learning the language. So I had to write up a course that embraced not only the language, but the traditional culture of my people. And we ran it, and we called it Nyungar Know-How, because the people were coming to learn about Nyungar, and they were going to know how it was done. We had over 30 people at that course, and the feedback that we got was very encouraging. Some of the things that we spoke about were introducing the cosmology of Nyungar through storytelling. We looked at land. We looked at Kura, the land before time. And we looked at the story of the Swan River. The Swan River wasn't called the Swan River by Nyungars. It was called the Beelier, just the river. Then we looked at family. Yay, Murk, our family today. Families of the past today. And that was very interesting, because out of that particular presentation came a lot of information that people had never heard of before. Then we looked at Nyungar knowledge, Buddha, yesterday's traditions linked to today. It went for a full day, and then we finished off with a question and answer time. And the one thing that came out of it was people had said, we didn't know that these things happened. I said, a lot of people don't. They don't realise it happened until they attend a workshop where they start from scratch and they learn about the Aboriginal culture of the people whose land they are on. And let me say to you, when I do a Welcome to Country, I always let people know that this is the ancient land of Nyungar, most ancient in the world. Now, I only found that out in the past 5 years. A scientist actually told me about it. But to me, I always knew that this was an ancient land. When we looked at the program, part of that program was taking people for a bushwalk around Herdsman Lake. At the time, people didn't realise that Yalagonga is buried at Herdsman Lake. When we found out later, we said to the management of Herdsman Lake, why don't we have a healing ceremony to heal the land of our great leader from the past. So this particular program, it wasn't just about the Wadjalas learning about Nyungar culture, it was also about me and Neville learning stuff that came out of this particular program. When I came back to the university and I gave them some feedback about the program, I said to them, if you are considering allowing Nyungar language to be taught, you have got to accept that it also means people need to come and learn about the traditional way that Nyungar people lived, camped, hunted and gathered, walked about. They had a law, not only storytelling law, but they had law. They had a spiritual way of doing things that a lot of us still find difficult to accept today. And one of the things that I want to highlight that we talked about this morning, and I also made very clear to the people at Herdsman Lake at the time, and that was about the car, the fire. The Nyungar people set fire to the bush. This flushed out the animals so they were easier to hunt. It also caused seeds to germinate and cleared paths to travel on. They were never without a campfire for spiritual reasons, for cooking, tool making uses, or just sitting around the campfire talking and celebrating. People don't realise how important in Nyungar know-how the fire and the water, the air and the land is to Aboriginal people. I just spoke about tool making. That's what our Nyungar people would make. And that was part of the course. On the day that we ran that Nyungar know-how course, the people had to crush up the rat boy gum. Then they had to crush up the kangaroo poo and then mix it all together with ash from the fire. The outcome was they had made a little tub to take home. And in the olden days, these were made in such a way that they would cut meat. It would be a proper knife to slice the meat open. So when we talk about the fire, as far as Nyungar know-how is concerned, we are talking about something that is the most important place in the camp. If I had my way, we would have a fire tin outside here and it would be going all the time. But we've got to also consider the rules and regulations of today. When the Nyungar people sat around the campfire, that was the teaching and learning place of adults to children. We never had pencils, we never had computers, we never had cameras. The only thing that we had was knowledge in our head that was being given and handed down, and for children, they would take it away and it would become part of their homework to continue learning about the knowledge that had been handed to them around the campfire. Now let me just say, if we were at a campfire and there's a whole group of families there, and the men were over there sitting talking, if you as a child left your mother campfire and walked over to those men, you would have a stick dropped on your toe and told to get back over to your mother. So not only were there rules and regulations through family, land, there was also knowledge. There were rules and regulations. Could you imagine how those young children sat back and learned in those days? It wasn't easy. I find it very difficult today to remember things. I drive my daughter mad because I'm always asking, what do we do now? The other very important stick to me was this one here, my wana. My mother died when I was 40 years old. And at her funeral, the Wongai people from Warburton Ranges came down in a truck to show their respect to this beautiful lady who worked and lived up in Warburton Ranges and who was no longer here. And they had made me a wana and brought it to the funeral. And they told my father afterwards, Fred, this is your daughter's wana. She is now in charge of your family. And let me say, people, I wouldn't take it home. I thought they were singing me to Warburton Ranges. I left it with my dad for 10 years. Then one day I sat down and I was thinking, hang on, I need to go and get my wana. And I went over to Dad and I said, Dad, I need to pick my wana up, eh? He said, yes, I've been waiting for you to come and get it. Then we sat down talking about what it meant for me to have a wana. It meant I was in charge of the family. And when I look back at what I'd been doing for those 10 years, it was exactly what I had been told, what my father had been told, to look after the family. A little later on, I was also told by a very beautiful Warburton Ranges lady that I had been made a traditional law woman when they brought this wana down and gave it to me. My knowledge where Aboriginal culture was concerned at the age of 40 was, oh no, it's a book, it'll stay there, I'll go and do those things later. But it made me realise where I was going with programs such as Nyungar Know-How. Nyungar Know-How was the first little program that Neville and I had written up, but it certainly wasn't the last. Today, we have written up a program called the WA program, which we are utilising within the education system here. And hopefully, over the next 12 months, we will see more people coming and doing the WA program through people like Denise, Danielle, Catherine, Tom and Carl. Because I always tell people, if you're going to live on my country, you need to know about my culture. For many years it took me time to teach, read, study, research, and let me say, when I look back, I don't know how I did it. But I had a sister by the name of Robin, She worked for Catholic Education at the time. And she rang me up one day and she said, can we set up an organisation so that you could come up here and teach Aboriginal culture to our Catholic schools? Because apparently schools were getting in touch with people to go and talk to their schools, do things at the school, and the people were letting them down. They weren't turning up. So we set up the little Nyungar Association. Yellowkitch is after my grandfather, Tom Bennell, it's his Nyungar name, and Mort family. We're the family of Tom. That was about 30 years ago. And we are still being sought to teach Nyungar know-how programs within schools, out in the community, but my aim is to get them to come here to the wetlands, and working with management committee and staff here, that's our aim, is to ensure that courses like Nyungar know-how are offered not only to school kids but to adults as well. Perhaps my dream for this place is tourism. I can see tourism becoming the main program for this place. So when I was given that wana and I took it home, I realised how important my job was within not only the family, but within the community as well. Because when you are made a law woman, you have a responsibility that no other lady has. You are responsible for ensuring that your culture and your traditions are never forgotten about. Hopefully, that's one of my dreams, is that it never happens here on Nyungar country. I'd like to talk about the importance of a kangaroo skin. As I said earlier today, the kangaroo is my old pop's totem. But I can remember when we were kids back up in the bush, where Dad would go out and catch a kangaroo, bring it back home, and Nana and Dad would hang it up in the tree, let all the blood drop out. Then Nana would skin the rabbit, so the kangaroo, take the skin off, so that's what it would look like. But when they took it off the kangaroo, there would be meat still on it, because we never had things like we've got today to get it all off. So we had to lay it down on the ground, leave it for 2 or 3 days. Who came and ate all the meat?
Ants.
All the little ants and the bugs from out of the bush. So the importance of catching a kangaroo or an emu or whatever it was, we had a responsibility to ensure that the animals in the bush were cared for as well. And then, after we hung the skin back up and let it dry out, Nana would make, and the men would sit down and make bags like that would carry our food. The men would put their tools in it. But my favourite one is the one that was made for the baby. And it would be sewn up. And this would come over here. That would be the carrying bag for the baby. It would stand inside. The fur would be on the inside because the baby needed a rug to wrap itself in. And the mothers would hook it over her shoulder and carry baby. If you wanted a coat made, 7 kangaroo skins would be required. to make a coat big enough so that it would also cover the family at night. It was also used as a blanket. Noongar know how. It happened even back over 250 years ago, 300 years ago. Aboriginal people were practicing their language. They had knowledge of their land, where they could go hunting and gathering. They had knowledge of who their family was, who they could marry, who they couldn't marry. And most of all, they had that knowledge, the courage that was embedded into their head. So the kangaroo skin is very important to us today. We've got a little thing. Now this one here, very special to me. It's a kuruma that was made for me and given to me just before he died. And that was from probably my favourite traditional elder. Gosh, I've forgotten his name now. But he told me that he had cut down a grass tree and he made the kuruma from the grass tree. Then he ochred it with beautiful red ochre, smoothed it, I would say, with the beautiful nuts from the sandalwood tree, so that it was smooth. And then he would ochre it with the beautiful red ochre. And it was a gift to me. I'll think of his name, everybody, before I go. Why do we need kurumas? Because we need to carry our food in. We need somewhere to put our food. Or sometimes we needed somewhere for baby to sleep in. So it wasn't just a bowl to be used for food only. It was a bowl that was used according to what the family needed on the day. When I look at these three gifts that were given to me, I think to myself, why me? Why did I have to do it? Like I said earlier, I don't have a college degree and neither do I have a university degree. But I do have a degree in the life skills of Nyungar. And when we put Nyungar know-how together to teach the ladies and gentlemen on that day, and we looked at those specific headings of Borja, land, Mut, family, and Karajan, knowledge. And I started to think about, where am I going to get all this information from? Majority of it in my readings. One of my favourite books was from Daisy Bates and her stories. And I made some comments. In sharing our stories from the dream time, whether it be Nyungar, Tiwi Island, or wherever we live on Nyungar Aboriginal land, our language connects us with traditions, culture, land, family, and knowledges which will never fade away from history. Through stories, we bring our dreaming alive with the uses of Aboriginal and Torres Strait resources, and many of these are available throughout the world via many different links. For example, books, computers, worldwide website. In closing, I want to encourage you all to build up your resources, to share in your storytelling, which will enhance the dreaming and the cosmology of our people, ensuring our language remains firmly entrenched in the at-sea history of Australia. And you know, like I said, that was written up back in 2012, and that was when Neville and I ran that course over at Herdsman Lake. Little did we know that we were going to be going down this other track by setting up this organisation in order to be available for Catholic schools. When people started hearing about us and what we were doing, we had invitations from everywhere. And it got so busy that I ended up deciding to retire from Murdoch University after about 9 years of work over there. And then I ended up with a job with Catholic Education to go and work from Herdsman Lake. But not only did I work with Herdsman Lake, I also worked with Circle, who very proudly worked with us and helped us do resources, set up programs, and we set up the Buoy program over there, which is what we are offering here at the wetlands. The Buoy program consists of learning about Aboriginal culture from a perspective that you want to learn from. So I think we've got it from art, storytelling, walkabouts. We do it, I'm just trying to think now, I've lost, what's some of the other programs that we do? Oh yeah, building my miles. And that one's a very, very popular one, believe me.
Yeah, and medicine, two-way science. Medicine, two-way science.
Oh yeah, and also the science one. So, you know, we're talking about something that didn't just come up in the last 10 years. It was earlier than 2020 that we were teaching about Nyungar language and culture. Today, we still get invited to do things. Perhaps one of the special things that we've had here recently was we had a group of girls come from Wirrapunda Foundation. And you know, the saddest thing for me, ladies and gentlemen, was listening to the reason why those girls wanted to come and do a program here. And that was because they didn't know anything about their culture. Hey, mums and dads, if you're Aboriginal, you have a responsibility to teach your children. I used to look after a little boy, he's gone back to his dad now. He came to me when he was 3 months old. One of the first things that I taught him was to speak Nyungar. And one day he came home from daycare and I was talking about the kangaroo. And he growled at me and he said, no, that's not the kangaroo, that's the Nyungar. So, you know, why do we need to share our language and culture? Because it is the traditional and ancient history of the people who lived here before we came. And one of the things that my father always said, he said, daughter, it doesn't matter where you go, where you live, what you do, don't ever forget where you come from. And that has been something that I have never forgotten. I always tell people, you come down to my country, you're coming down not only to Fremantle, where I'm a traditional custodian, but I'm also a traditional custodian over on the Midland side. That's my father's mother's family's traditional grounds, and right across to the Ewart family. So when I look at the ancient maps of my people, I can stand up and say they're all my relations. They are my traditional elders. Muru is Yalagonga's country. Weep, his country is over there on the other side of the Upper Swan. Beelier is Mundi, down the southeast side. Beelier, here we are on Beelier country, Michiguru's country. And then down further, Banyala territory, down towards Rockingham Way.
What they call it
The only thing that saddens me here, where's the women? This is traditional land of women. It is not paternal, it is maternal lands. And the one lady, and I'll finish with her story, is about Fanny Balback. A lot of people said she was a mischievous old woman. No, she wasn't. To me, she was a warrior for women. And I'm very proud to have been part of a project that was done by Gina Williams, where we looked at her history, her story, and put her on the map, not as a mischievous old woman like my brother Neville always calls her, but as a woman who was a warrior for her women and her country and her people. Chidong really provided not nani or managed Nanyakani Nonokia Burua, Maman year of wood called Burda, Nalakanini Nicha, Nunga Boja, Nalakni, Jena, Karajan, Kura, Nalak, Jenabidi, Nicha. Like the flight of the boomerang, Kobadi feeds and flies, and he feeds on the sweets of the bank shear. So God bless you all and keep you safe. Till we meet again here on Nyungar country, the ancient land of the Aboriginal people, and as the clouds billow upon our country, let me remind you, we are one people, solid Australians. Nyungar. Thank you.